Is it on? We're recording? Right? I don't believe you. The Separation of Hating Church. Episode 2, The Wrath of Khan. Tokyo Drift? Then what are we even doing here? Boy, that is a tongue twister. Church and hate. Church and hate. Church and hate. Separation of church and hate. Welcome to Suncrest News. I'm Mitch Wright, and if you're wondering, yes, I did shave, so I have just a mustache for this video. My wife hasn't seen it yet. Walter Cronkite? I most certainly am not. The best app in the App Store is the Suncrest app. Just ask the 7 people who've reviewed it. It's also the best tool for this video experience outside of the comments and chat window. We've got all sorts of content to help you on your faith journey right here at Suncrest. There's a catalog of messages, content specifically for your kids, ways you can be # for the region, and much, much more. Hashtags, like hashed potatoes. It's like the little tags, the little tags on the potatoes. You gotta peel those off. That's what we're talking about? Understood. Got it. If you're a new viewer, let us know. You can do so by either finding the I'm New button in the app or by texting us at the number on the screen. And for letting us know that, we want to send you a digital gift card directly to your phone for some coffee. We are continuing our outdated and frankly irrelevant dig into pumpkin spice. With us today is Mia. Mia's a retired coffee shop barista and has the scoop. Mia, pumpkin spice, still a thing? And if so, why?
Hello, Suncrest. So your former local barista coming at you talking about the pumpkin spice latte. So it's a classic. Everybody knows that. It's in every season, every fall, but recently we've seen more alternatives like the pumpkin cold brew. So that's a great question of, is pumpkin spice in? Is it not? That's for you to decide. But the pumpkin spice is definitely a classic, and that's that.
Wow, this is a goldmine of information. Thank you, Mia. Mark your calendar for Saturday, November 7th for our next serve day. This Thanksgiving-themed day is centered around packing 100 meal boxes for our partner, Sojourner Truth House. In fact, the first 100 people to show up get a free sweaty shirt, courtesy of Suncrest. Sweat? Just sweats shirt? Like it's hot? Sweats? Sweatshirt, one word. Sure, sweatshirt. Food collection for these boxes has already started, so if you want to help a family in need celebrate their Thanksgiving this year, would you bring macaroni and cheese and not the garbage powdered kind, canned yams, canned green beans, and no-bake Jell-O cheesecake dessert? They can be dropped off in the Commons either during a weekend experience or Monday through Thursday, 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. Pollsters across the country have been asking America this question: singing to a video screen for church, yay or nay? I mean, you karaoke people have almost no excuse to say nay. But the rest of you, what do? Sing along or reflect? If you don't know which, then check out this next song and report back to us in the chat or comments.
When our homes are hit by heartbreak, let your presence meet us there. When the pain seems overwhelming, we hold on to you. When the streets are torn by chaos, we will be your hands and feet. my knees and lift this prayer to my Savior. For my life and for the world, you're the answer, Jesus.
The separation of church and hate. This week, we're digging into the humility that we all need during this season. The ability to look at our neighbor in the eye and say with the love of Jesus, "Listen, Rick, I know you're wrong. Thank you for letting me get that off my chest." This is about me, just me, being willing to admit that I might not know everything and that I might be wrong. Gross. Nope, I don't want that.
Hey everybody, your response to this message is going to be so interesting to me. It's one of those messages where I wish we were in person together so I could have a conversation face to face and get your feedback right away. Because here's what I anticipate. At the end of this message, a few people will say to me, "Greg, I flat out needed that. I have this part of my life wrong, and this is going to be my move to transformation. That's going to be beautiful." A few people, no doubt, will come up to me and say, "Greg, actually, I didn't need that one. I'm nailing this right now, and I hope that you are." But a lot of people, I think, will come up to me and say, "Greg, yeah, I see what you're saying, but ... fill in the blank. Tell me your story, your reason why this one doesn't actually apply to you." Now, some messages are more inclined than others to the "yeah, but" response. And I think the theme that we're tackling today is the one that is most inclined to it. So, we're in episode 2 of the separation of church and hate. And during this political election season, I want us to be very sensitive to the idea that many times followers of Jesus have a reputation for being negative or even hateful in this season. And I don't know why that is. For some reason, we think our calling to be humble and civil and kind has exceptions to it. If we think somebody's wrong about something or someone has earned our condemnation, we just go for it. So this is my absolute favorite cartoon ever. So we all know a Gary, right? And if you don't know one, it means that you're Gary. Anyway, we are in a political season, and Suncrest is neither a far left nor a far right church. So we're trying to be very healthy, very godly in the way that we navigate this particular political season. And by we, I of course don't just mean me. I mean you and me. I mean the way that we live our lives Monday through Saturday in our workplaces, in our homes, in the places we go for fun, around our dinner tables and on social media. I mean we absolutely carry the idea that we are the salt of the earth and the light of the world. Now, last week we started with a conversation about how our identity shapes our behavior in election season. And today I want to talk about humility. So these are 4 reasons for humility during an election season. Last week, the message was very much focused on people who are followers of Jesus. The whole idea behind the message was if your identity is in Christ, it would lead you to react in a certain way. The message about humility is a little bit different. It is absolutely rooted in the person and the way of Jesus. But because of the way humility works in real life, this message will be beneficial to you, I think, whether you're a follower of Jesus or not. What you might find is that humility actually has a lot of practical value in our lives, and in some ways that are counterintuitive to us, it actually works in real life. Now, again, humility is a godly quality, whether it's an election season or not. And so remember all the things I'm going to talk about. If you're in a dating season or a marriage season, if you're in a season of life where things are up and to the right and you're experiencing tremendous success, or whether you feel like a failure right now, these principles about humility fit every season of life. But during an election season, here's 4 reasons why humility is so important. Number 1, pride or hubris is actually weakness on display. Now listen, I know this is a little counterintuitive because people who try to show strength out of their pride might think that they're presenting to someone that they're stronger than the average person in the room. But all of us who can read a room a little bit understand what's going on, right? And many people who live out of their pride or need to act like they're one step above everybody else, it just shows how weak they are. I mean, I thought of just 4 categories of people. You should think about whether any of these fit you. There's the one-upper, right? The person who hears a story that gets told and then they have to have a better story or a story about themselves with better results. There's the line cutter, the person who thinks they deserve their spot in the line ahead of someone else who's already been waiting, or is just prideful enough to think, if I can figure out how to get in there, I deserve it. There's the always righter. Do you know anybody like this? Someone who's always right? Hey, kind of like Gary, if you don't know somebody like that, it means you're them. And there's the last worder, the person who always has to have the final say. One of the spiritual mentors in my life from his writing is a guy named Dallas Willard. He was a professor at the University of Southern California. And at the end of a lecture one day, one of his students was critiquing something that he said. Dallas certainly had the mental competency to blow that student out of the water, but instead he just ended the class and called it for the day. A student came up to him after the class and said, "Dallas, why did you let that student get away with that?" And this is what Dallas said: "I'm practicing the discipline of not needing to have the last word." It's a powerful discipline. So, I'm always fascinated by this song in the musical Hamilton. Why do you assume you're the smartest in the room? And since that's, of course, about Alexander Hamilton, you might think, well, wasn't Hamilton great? But what's the thing that kept Hamilton from true greatness? What's the thing that had him line up for a duel with Aaron Burr? It was actually his fatal flaw, his pride. Who is the real hero of the Hamilton story? Isn't it Eliza? The one who actually, out of following Christ, endures betrayal and then lives the most meaningful life. See, James, brother of Jesus, had to come to some conclusions about how he wasn't the smartest person in the room, how he had to change his mind, how his last word wasn't actually the right word. And when he changed his mind, he then led all of us who are followers of Jesus to do the same. I did a whole series on this about 15 months ago called Me and My Big Mouth, but just remember this. My dear brothers and sisters, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen and slow to speak. The person who's humble, especially in conversations that can be intense, like political conversations. The one who's quick to listen and slow to speak and slow to become angry. There's actually a strength in that. C.S. Lewis was describing humility once. This is what he said: "Do not imagine that if you meet a really humble man, he will be what most people call humble nowadays. Probably all you will think about him is that he seemed a cheerful, intelligent chap who took a real interest in what you said to him." It's one of the marks that is a distinction between humility and pride. Pride has to talk, pride has to assert, pride has to draw attention to self and my own opinions. Humility listens and puts the other first. Number 2, certainty belongs only to God. Now, last week we established that if someone is a Republican or a Democrat, that has nothing to do necessarily with whether they are a follower of Jesus or not a follower of Jesus. Most of the time, it just means they see a different way forward that is best and healthiest. And many times, Republicans and Democrats or any other party actually has very similar goals in mind, just decide on a different path to get there. In a letter that the Apostle Paul wrote to the church in Corinth, he was writing about the idea of loving one another, which of course takes humility and kindness. And then he gets into a little conversation that I think introduces humility to us. He starts to create the distinction between the world that God sees and the world that we see. And he actually casts it in a little bit of a distinction between the world we're able to see now and what we will experience one day in heaven. But listen to these words closely. He says, now we see things imperfectly, like puzzling reflections. But then we will see everything with perfect clarity. All that I know now is partial and incomplete. We should make that our memory verse for this week. For any of us, myself included, who deal with pride, I should just let this run through my mind. All that I know now is partial and incomplete. Now listen, I'm not saying that you shouldn't have conviction about certain issues. I'm saying that your convictions about your positions on certain issues should be accompanied by a posture of humility. To think that you know it all, to think that you know all there is to know, to think that you see the issue in its fullness is actually a position that only God has. Remember, God is theologically omnipotent, all-knowing. You and I are finite. Our knowledge is partial and incomplete. And if our knowledge about any particular thing is partial and incomplete, wouldn't the right way to approach it be to say, I could be wrong? You see, you don't have to change your views to be humble, but you will need to change how you feel about someone with opposing views. Number 3, with humility, you'll learn something. I surely can't be the only one who's had a conversation with someone who's on an opposite side of the issue with me, and I walk away thinking, I don't know how they could believe that. Or I don't know why anyone would ever have that perspective. And whenever I catch myself saying those phrases, even in my mind, I have to be reminded that I'm actually admitting my ignorance. I don't know how. I don't know why. But whatever issue someone has a perspective on, or whatever candidate someone supports, they have a reason for why they've done it. And they've probably lived a different life than you and a different life than me. And there's an education to be had to actually learn with humility why someone has a certain view. But we're so quick to pull the trigger. This past February, Garth Brooks was doing a concert in Detroit. Now, Garth Brooks graduated from Oklahoma State University. He might be the most popular graduate of that university ever, unless you're a football fan. Then Barry Sanders might be the most well-known graduate of Oklahoma State. Barry Sanders is a Hall of Fame running back, played for the Detroit Lions. So to honor his fellow alum, when Garth Brooks did his concert in Detroit, he decided to wear a Barry Sanders football jersey. He walked out to the concert and someone caught a picture of him from the back with the word Sanders, the name Sanders, on the back of his jersey. And immediately the internet blew up. And people were commenting on how Garth Brooks was now endorsing, get this, Bernie Sanders. Why is it that people jump to conclusions so quickly that they don't stop and reflect or try to learn something? It's because of our pride. And I want to ask you, whenever you're in a political conversation, to step back and not assert what you know immediately, but instead say, I have something to learn. I think the best phrase that I've learned to use in these situations is this phrase. Hey, help me understand. Help me understand. Hey, I see that differently than you. Help me understand why you see it the way you do. At the end of those conversations, many times I'm unconvinced, but I at least learned something. And every now and then, what I learned was that I was wrong. So, with humility, you learn something. Number 4, a little known secret. Humility is actually what leads people to change their minds. I don't know if you've noticed this, but out of all the banter that comes with great confidence in social media, I still haven't found anybody who decided to change their perspective. But if you've ever changed your mind about something significant, if you've ever opened yourself up to rethink something, it probably was because the person who was across from you had a humble and patient and civil posture. Actually, what the scriptures teach us is this is our pathway back to God. I don't know about you, but if someone's wagging their finger at me and telling me that God's going to condemn me and get me or else, it doesn't really draw me to God. But Romans chapter 2, verse 4 says this, "Don't you see how wonderfully kind, tolerant, and patient God is with you? Does this mean nothing to you? Can't you see that it is His kindness that is intended to turn you from your sin? It's God's graciousness to me, even when I'm wrong and out of bounds, that actually opens me up to learn, to listen, and to be transformed." Now, I don't want you to use humility just as a tool in your belt to convince other people of what you want, but it absolutely is true that humility is what will lead to someone changing their minds. So this humility, this civility, this kindness, I want you to hear this clearly. It's not a personality trait. It's not that some people get it and some people don't, and you just say, oh, it's not part of my personality. Humility and civility and kindness is a character trait. It is something that you grow up into, where in maturity, you become the person who is humble and civil and kind. So, what do you think? Do you need this message? Yes? No? Or might you still be tempted to say, yeah, but there's this one person. And what I'm asking you today is to get off your butt. No buts, just humility, civility, and kindness.
If you're looking for communion, it's right here. Let's take a moment and reflect on the love of Jesus, represented by food and drink. I'll put a timer and a prayer on the screen, and when you're ready, pray, eat, and drink. Our fact checkers are telling me I nailed it this service, so let's call it a wrap. Remember, when we get together, it's so great, but it's not as good as actively living the life that Jesus lived. So, this week, my online friends, go and be the church. Also, don't forget to vote. And if you're a Christian, you have to vote for... So, If you want to help a family in need celebrate their Thanksgiving this year, would you bring stovetop stuffing, instant mashed potatoes, jars of gravy, and or cranberries? Cadbury eggs.